Good morning. Welcome to Crosstalk Podcast. I am David Wofford, and this is Eatonton First United Methodist Church. And we are here with, I say we, myself and Brian Beveridge are here, just the two of us. Joe Deloach may slip in later. He had a little accident apparently at the barn with his livestock, so he's coming in later. Today we're going to talk about what in the world. That was the sort of the theme of our conversation, but I want us to talk about and think about God in the world. Where is God in the world? And so we're going to talk, Brian and I are going to talk, the two of us, about God, which is what we do. We're a Crosstalk podcast, but we're going to talk about where God is in the world. And so the world is seems to be going to where in a handbasket, as Mama would say. But I turned on the TV this morning and talk of nuclear bombs going off and Ukraine and Japan, or excuse me, not Japan, Ukraine and Russia, and then China and Taiwan, and getting in the car. I'm just, it's really a nice peaceful day here in Eatonton, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around what is going on in the world. But what I would hope that we could ask the question, though the world seems to be going to heck in a handbasket, I would hope that we could ask the question, where is God in the world right now? So what do you think there, Brian?
I think he's with the people that need him the most right now, even though he's always with us. But a lot of times we overlook the fact that he's with the people that need him the most, the strongest, putting his efforts towards them. Mm-hmm. And right now, Ukraine, the third world countries that are, all their military forces are moving into. So, they're moving in all these, countries around there, getting ready for whatever's going to eventually happen.
Do you think it's going to become more? Do you think other countries are going to get involved? I keep hearing.
I have a feeling before it's over with, it's going to be another war that's going to draw the whole world into it.
Because it sounds like China is walking side by side with Russia, and the United States and the West are sort of walking side by side. NATO and.
Well, they're all trying to stay out of it, which I understand to a certain extent. But if you let it go too long, it's like a wound and it starts festering. Mm-hmm. And then you get the pestilence, you get the pus, you get everything that starts flowing out of it that's evil and bad. And they're trying to let Russia screw themselves up and say, okay, we're idiots. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, look at what happened with Japan. We stayed out of the war for how long?
Well, it was
Japan came and attacked Pearl Harbor. And then it was like automatically, yes, we're going to war. Is that what it's going to take before we step in and help Ukraine? Because if Russia takes Ukraine, they're on the way back to taking back the whole Soviet Union that they used to have, mm-hmm. which gives them all the uranium, which means they're going to start making nuclear weapons again, which they've already been making, but they're going to have all the supplies they need to completely make what they want.
Well, for me, we've read history. Most people know their history. Most people know the history of war. Most people know sort of what has happened throughout history, and it's just sort of, it's unbelievable that we're coming back to this again. It just is unbelievable. I personally think that this is a far more sinister sort of group of people that are controlling all of these things. The central banks, you've got the central banks of Europe and North America, and the Western Hemisphere, so to speak. And you've got Russia and China sort of bucking the system, saying, no, you're not in charge of banking and finance. We are going to have our own. And so there's this sort of financial sort of cataclysm happening. But I don't know. So I go to like 50,000 feet in my mind for what's going on in our world right now. But if no matter what I go to, no matter how far up I go, for me it's good and evil. And I'm not saying that the Russians are good or evil, and I'm not saying the Ukrainians are good or evil, or the Americans are good or evil, but it just feels like there's such a better way So for me, I have to grasp for where is God in this?
Okay. And
Where
see,
is God?
if you notice in times of war, times of struggle, times of depression, like with what we're feeling here in America, how many people are getting back to their roots and going back to God and finding God, in that time of despair?
I think more. I think people are starting to realize that something far bigger is happening in our world. I do think that people are starting to. I mean, maybe slowly, but they're starting to sort of realize, I gotta go. There's got to be something better than this.
Oh yeah. And so even like in Edenton, you see a complete change in culture that's already starting to form. You see a new. It's almost like a new atmosphere kicking in, and you see a lot more people. We've had people come back to church that haven't been to church since COVID hit, that have come back to church since all this started.
Yeah, I hate to say I'm hopeful, but I am hopeful that these sort of things that are out of our control in the world are helping us to realize that that the one thing we need is each other, and we need God, and we need the love of God through each other. And so I just hope that in the middle of all this that there is sort of an awakening of the people, and that when we come back together, that somehow coming back together will help us be reminded of where God is in all this.
It will, because when we get woke up.
Hello, Joe.
Good morning, everybody.
Joe's a little
We
gentle.
we might be like Joe and move a little slow today. when we wake
You
up.
only knew.
You can't be wrestling cows. I told
I'll
you
tell
not to do
you.
that.
Too old for that.
All right.
Sorry I'm late.
We're talking about what's going on in the world, and I asked the question, where is God in the world?
Good question.
Now, I think it's a good question. I mean, God in the world, where's God in all the malarkey?
When do our politicians even acknowledge he exists? I mean, really,
I understand.
if they actually believed what we profess, how could they do what they do?
I don't know. Can you imagine sitting in, I don't know, any sort of job in the federal government that's very powerful, and can you imagine having to make some of the decisions that are being made, or having to take orders for the decisions that are being made at the top?
And everybody's so busy passing blame off to somebody else.
Yeah.
What is it? Yesterday, Pelosi said government spending does not have anything to do with inflation. I'm thinking, I'm not even an economy major, and I know better than that. But
The more they waste money, the more we had to spend money to put money back into what they waste.
I think people in the nation understood the last 2 or 3 months. There was this instinctive inflation's happening. I better get things while they're cheaper.
well,
And people began to just buy. And I even thought, like, thinking about when I began to hear rumblings of fertilizer is going up. Price of fertilizer is going up. Well, even I was like, well, I better go to the Ace Hardware
and buy me a sack.
and get 2 or 3 sacks of. Who knows if it'll be there in another year?
Well,
I'm just going to Joe's house.
yeah, well, let me tell you.
Cow manure is a good fertilizer.
I became very familiar with that yesterday, by the way. But anyway, a major component of fertilizer is ammonium nitrate. Used to be called soda. That's what you drop around well, we call it dropping, but you put out around your corn and everything. It makes it green. It makes it grow very fast. Ammonia is the major component. According to Keith Felder, our county agent, the price of ammonia has gone up 200%.
I believe it.
Already, and that's not stopping. Now we've got phosphate
Yeah.
comes out of where? Afghanistan. Who controls that? Russia. So this is the reason I did what I did yesterday. I foresee about July and August, I could be wrong,
I think you're right.
when people look at how much it's costing to feed livestock and the price of hay, the market's going to be flooded.
Well, so what will happen speaking of what's going on in the world, what will happen when there's no fertilizer, or the fertilizer that there is twice as expensive? You said 200%, so that's 2 times, right?
Yeah.
You're saying 2 times the price.
In other words, if it costs $50 now, it's going to cost $150.
So if I'm just getting common sense here. So if I have to spend $15,000 for a $30,000 profit, but now my fertilizer is going to cost me $25,000. Am I willing to work all summer long?
Yeah.
For
And
much
of
less
course,
profit?
anything like that, if you know anything about hay, since we live in a county that has a lot of cows in it,
Sure.
a lot of hay's cut. The gentleman who helped me yesterday rents the 30 acres down the road. They fertilized it, they worked it, everything, had a pretty hay field. Went in there to cut it, there was no grass. The army worms had invaded and eaten it all up almost in one night.
Oh my goodness! All
So
day.
all that money is gone. They didn't get any I don't know. What's happening in our world? I tell you what's going to happen. People are going to start fighting for food.
Exactly.
That's what worries me.
We're on the we're and honestly, if people listen to this, hear anything, what's going on in the world? Well, there may be a nuclear war across the the pond. God forbid there be a nuclear anything, but with Russia and Ukraine, and my heart breaks for what's happening there. And I went to school at seminary with Ukrainian students. I suspect those Methodist Ukrainians are no different than you and me on most things, but they happen to be sort of anciently Russian, and Russians think that they deserve to come back into they want the fields, they want the resources.
Oh yeah.
And
The
what
waterfront.
what is Russia against Ukraine for? The way I see it now, I'm no expert. Ukraine wants to be independent and have their independence. Russia doesn't want them to have it. They want to control it. They want to control their resources. But what's going to happen to the world when I understand by reading Ukraine furnishes a lot of the grain
That's right.
for Europe, Western
Well, in
Europe.
America used to be wheat.
Yeah.
Wheat, but
Yeah.
what we do now is more soy based.
Right, but I mean,
These are things that most people don't care about.
major component of cow feed, is grain.
But what about why is America producing so much soy as opposed to wheat? It used to be wheat, but now it's
Well,
soy.
you got so many people that wanted that whole soy is good for you thing.
Well,
So
soy is used in the place is you can grind it up. You can use it for silage. You can use it for.
You can
It
make
can
milk
dry.
out of it.
You can take it, harvest it. It becomes a major component of feed. Yeah.
Okay.
You can use it for a lot of different things. You actually can use soy feed for pigs.
We
Yeah.
used to be the bread basket of the world. I mean, that was even 30 years ago. We were the bread basket of the world,
And
but not anymore. We're soy based.
what's happening in the world, our world, America, people don't want to work anymore.
Well, see, that's the problem.
That's it.
We outsourced everything to other countries instead of having everything based here in America. When this country was founded, they were planning on it being a independent, completely independent, self-reliant country that could take care of its own self.
Not anymore.
Well, we started letting other countries come in. Well, when you start letting other countries immigrate to your country, it's not just your country anymore. It becomes a worldwide country. So technically, if you look at America, it's a world country, not America anymore.
But
Because America used to be independent. It was their own country. They did their own stuff. They made their own products. They produced their own oil.
But if you talk to various ethnicities, people of different ethnicities, they will say we are American. They have owned the American way. I don't think I don't think the world coming to us is the problem so much as the decisions at the top to allow us to lose manufacturing, competitive edges for manufacturing. We've created environmental standards that create and tax implications that create such a disadvantage for companies in America. It's impossible for them to consider staying if they want to make a profit. So they go out and they get cheap labor, which is morally and ethically, I think, questionable at least.
Right.
But now
then-
you think about it, if you were out for a profit, if I was making, I don't know, whatever, am I going to pay my workers $1 an hour, or am I going to pay my workers $10, $11 an hour? Which one are you going to go with? Because you want the bigger profit.
Right. Well, if you're sitting at home and you're thinking my profits will either be 25 million
Or-
or they'll be 50 million, well, what greed becomes the
Where's God in all of this?
Where is God in all
It's
this?
it's greed. It's selfishness. It's love of money.
It is.
Now,
And some people used to take pride in their work too.
there's no pride in any work now.
Well, but
No.
We've gotten lazy.
But even, no matter what industry one is in, it's become greed based. It's not become people. It's become less about people and more about greed.
How did that happen? Did God turn his back on us?
I'd say it was the other way around. I'd
I
say
agree
we
with
turned
you.
our
I don't
back on
think
God.
I don't think God's ever turned his back on us. I think in all of his infinite wisdom, here I am, a little Presbyterian here. This is
That's
all in
okay.
God's plan. Now, how's it gonna work out? I don't know.
Well, so I look at the prodigal son. We're like the prodigal son that goes away, and God's given us our like part of our inheritance. We go out there and we blow it, and turn our back on him, and then we come back to God when we're like laying in a pigsty, and wallowing in the muck because we had nowhere else to go.
And see, I don't. You talk about worldwide. I can only use, of course, I can think about Europe and Africa and China, but here I am, little old Eatonton, Georgia, my little old operation. I sat down and figured up, because I'm slow about this. I figured up how much I was paying each month for cow feed
Yeah,
and how much I paid for hay.
yeah.
Last year, 2021, I spent $11,000 on those old ragtag cows. I thought, I'm out of my mind. What am
Well, it's inflation.
Yeah.
Well, see, I got friends that are $20,000 right now in debt to the feed store.
Oh, yeah.
They get bulk feed, and they're $20,000 in debt to the feed store, and their feed price keeps going up
Oh, yeah.
tons.
So when do you tap out and say I can't do this
Do
anymore?
like I did. I just drew the line. I said, oh, nope.
Well, see, that's why a lot
Mine
of
was just a hobby now, and I wasn't making anything
But
off of it.
when all the hobbies walk away, when all the small farmers say no more, then that's a percentage of the resources.
So that's
that are-
what's happened with the dairy industry in Putnam County.
half
almost
the dairy
no
farmers
small
are turned
dairy.
into soy.
Yeah, there's almost
They plant canola. They plant soy. They plant
there's
all
almost
these cow fields you used to see in Putnam County. You now
planted.
see canola. You see soy. You see
Right, that's what
corn.
I'm
You
saying.
see.
Yeah, but I can't eat canola, and I don't want to eat soy. But like if we get down to an economic crisis, you can take a wheat berry,
You know,
and
I
grind it
think-
down and make a bread out
I
of
think
it.
the world.
It's like Ben says, capitalism is what's taking over.
I think the world needs to take a lesson from the Great Depression.
Of course, but what's going to happen? Well, I don't know what's going to happen. I'd
Less
love
is
to know
more.
what's going to happen, but what it seems to me that the greed, overtaking the common, the interconnectivity of men and women for God's glory and for the good of the community. We've come so far in greed that I'm thinking about history. I'm thinking about the Depression. And we've come so far that the world has now become so self-centered,
Yeah.
so isolated, so interconnected economically, but isolated personally. Like you don't know your neighbor anymore. Like we don't tend to know our neighbors.
So I want to bring up the church because what you just said about the greed part. If you look at our church, how much has the hierarchy got into greed?
You're talking about the United Methodist Church.
Right. Because they want that power. They want that money that they've been sitting on.
I don't know how much money the people at the top have, so to speak, if they're bishops or what. They don't make that much money. They make money, but they could do a lot better in corporate America financially, if you want to just get right down to it. But they do have power.
Right now, they're guaranteed a lifetime appointment until they die
Well, it's
or
the
retire
power.
out.
It's the walking in a room and changing the power dynamics in a room.
All right.
That's it. It's not the money. I mean, they have money, but they're not.
So we're going to say that we feel what's wrong with the world today is greed, love of money.
And power.
What do we do in Eatonton, Georgia, in First Methodist? What do we do about this? Do we just sit back and say too bad, or how do we combat this? What can we do?
We've already started really and truly in our church with the getting past the greed part because we do a lot with PCO.
Well, for me, it gets. I'll go. You're getting ground level. I think Jesus talks about listening for that still small, or I should say, Isaiah talks about listening for the still small voice.
Yeah.
And I think that the power of God in the midst of all the world is a still small voice. It's that where two or three are gathered.
But you have to be receptive to His voice.
It's that little Jiminy Cricket sitting on your shoulder.
But it is getting small. Like there's something about getting, and I mean literally coming together in small groups, coming together in Sunday school, coming together with your neighbor, going fishing with your son or your daughter, going, whatever, making cookies. You know, like these little places are where God shows up in the midst of a broken world.
That's right.
And see, a lot of people, and I'm bringing up the technology thing. Yes, we use technology but it can be bad or good. We have small groups that meet via technology here, like our small group for our podcast. It's a way to reach out to people in this broken world that don't get that they're not reached. And that's one thing. Even if we're not doing small groups, like because the gas prices keep going up, eventually people aren't gonna be able to afford to come to church 2 or 3 times a week.
If it keeps happening, yeah. Well, but then we get small and we get personal. We happen to have this bus, right? At some point, if people can't afford to come or can't physically get to church, then we have neighbors that can ride share. I know that sounds
No,
out of this world to some people, but
150 years ago, that's how they got to church.
But you know, we have this bus, we have this van that holds 14. If you had one or two, or you'd have to have two because it's safe sanctuary. But if you had 2 folks that would be willing to get in the car or in the van and just go find those folks. Now, I mean, obviously, if the people are physically unable to come, that's one thing. But if it's because they just, you know, no one's giving them a chance, or they just don't have a car, that may happen. The other thing that you talk about, you're predicting sort of what may happen. For me, and I said this to the group of Protestant pastors a couple weeks ago, and I've talked multiple times to PCO, to the board at PCO. I think we're about to find ourselves. You talk about food shortages, where the church can be and should be and will be. This church specifically, and others with us, will have to be a place where the doors are open for lunch or for a supper. You know, it may be that And I'm excited about this in some weird way, that if that happens, we have the opportunity and the ability. This church has the ability to open its doors and be a soup kitchen and a bread line.
The good thing about that, even though it's a bad thing, it brings them closer to God. It gives that agape love,
Of course. And
to mankind.
And you know, there's nothing wrong with while they're eating for us to have praise music overhead, or for one of us in the church to offer a devotion and a prayer. I mean, you don't have to force it on people if they don't want it. But I tell you what, food, the one thing we can do is meet people's needs. If the church meets the needs of the people, then God will show up in that. So
Very true.
I just don't know what's wrong with the world, except that there is a strong. It seems like we're entering into a season of war.
Do you think, with all our technology and how closely we are intertwined, and it's never been this way before, we're so aware of everything around us. Has this happened before and we just didn't know it?
Yeah, maybe if Atlantis actually existed, right?
Right. I mean, you know,
We talk
Pompeii
about
fell into the ocean. But I mean,
Plato talked about Atlantis.
the point is, we are aware of it, and you know,
Well, so I was reading I get a bunch of, I'm a tech guru, so I get a lot of different stuff about tech. And one of the things that they were talking about were churches that were going straight virtual church. They do online giving, they do online praise, they do online worship, they do online everything. They meet once a month because in the town they're in, they've already gotten to where gas is $8 a gallon.
Well, like in California, yeah.
And I mean, that's where one of these churches was. And everything is online, but they still get that church.
So I'm too Pentecostal for that. I mean, I understand that we need to meet the need, and we certainly should be jacking into the matrix, so to speak, and getting into. We should be doing this. Like this is very important. But I was after church at the 11 o'clock service. Someone asked me to find a couple of people and lay hands and pray for the Holy Spirit to move upon them, and I don't want to lose the ability to literally offer communion, to literally come together with 3 or 4 people and lay hands on shoulders or on
you know, looking back, listening to all the sermons and everything in church and Sunday school, whatever, and I think what really influenced me the most was the companionship with people, mentors.
That's right.
To me, that is such you don't get that online.
No.
You don't know what it's all. You become so self-centered, so isolated.
Yeah.
I mean, in church, some days when you feel blue, you look around, you think, maybe you know some people that are having it worse than you, and you think, you know,
Right.
there's comfort there. I would not want to lose that.
And, I mean, barring smallpox or the Black Plague, I just think the doors need to be open, and where there's a will, there's a way. People will find their way to where they're going. Now, obviously, there's hardships. We have a van; we could get to them. I think it's that important for us to travel the distance to see our family, our beloved, and I think that's where God meets us.
Do you think there's going to be a worldwide, I'm going to use the word disaster, to bring people to
see.
awaken them?
One thing I'm looking at, and this goes back to the Great Depression, eventually it's going to get to where they had the gas outs,
Meaning,
where they ration how much gas you can get.
oh yeah, coupons. Can you see
Because
teenagers today with coupons? That's going to be interesting.
once they start running out of oil,
Right.
because Russia is our main oil, we get all our oil from where? Russia.
Well, we get what 20%, something to that effect.
Even though we
So-
have a pipeline that's shut down.
Well, they don't want to go across holy ground here or Indian land, but they didn't mind building like big casinos and
Oh, yeah.
hotels
on
and
top
all that
of
on top of them.
burial grounds.
That's what gets me about people. They are so dedicated to this one piece of land, but they don't look at the other stuff that they're over here enjoying. This on top of somebody's grave.
I think that that when people get to that sort of upper echelon of power, they become either connected to each other or possessed or something.
Possessed.
Something happens to people because it seems to happen whether it's in, like you said, in tribal culture. I mean, like the chief makes decisions and gets kickbacks, or the bishop makes decisions and does whatever.
It's all about let's line that palm.
I think the
Senators, presidents.
higher you go up in any bureaucracy, the less they have in common with those of us that are at the bottom.
Well, and if you're sitting in an office answering phone calls and solving problems that are just sort of formulaic, and you don't come to church with the people, as an example, or you don't find yourself in the street with the people. If they're just, it's kind of like Marie Antoinette, like
Let them eat cake.
Yeah.
I just wonder if some of our politicians know what it would be like most of us live from paycheck to paycheck. If they did, they'd do a better business of managing the government money.
Look, they don't even do their job. They have people that do their job for them.
Yeah,
They don't write their speeches.
that's right.
They read it off a screen after something like David might be writing their speeches.
If they could
I'm
read.
not saying he would, but
But just know that the wealth of our nation, of our world, speaking of what's going on in the world, the significant bulk of wealth in our world is held by just a few. I mean, in our nation, I've heard there's a conversation. I've heard a conversation of 13 families. I don't know, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, these sorts of folks. But then, but you've got so much held by so few. I also heard that Bill Gates has purchased a lot of farmland. So you start thinking about the wealthiest among us in our country have taken control of agrarian lands in our country.
He who controls agriculture and the production of food will be the most
But
powerful.
we've been here before in this country. In the turn of the 1800s and in the turn
that's
of
how
the
they
century,
crippled the South.
the oligarchs were doing the same thing. I mean, we had the Vanderbilts and the all the steel man. What's his name? Carnegie.
Yeah.
You had all these folks. The Rockefellers. They were controlling the masses, and the working class were just left to figure it out. Teddy Roosevelt and some of those populists that came in broke that up with the Department of Justice. I mean, I'm reciting history at this point, but the point is we've been here before, and I think we've emerged in that. What will we do? The question is, what will we do?
If you look at how our nation was before the war, the states, you had agriculture was south, industry was north. We were sending all the agriculture up north, and all the industry was being held in the north. They weren't sending it to the south.
Sure.
You had very few industrial plants in the south. That's why when the war went on, we had plenty of cotton.
Sure.
What do you do? Throw cotton at each other?
We didn't have machines to make guns.
Right.
So we were using northern-made guns that were made in Springfield, Illinois.
Right.
So that supply and demand was going back and forth. And it's the same thing with the world that's going on now. We don't produce our own stuff. We produce a certain amount of stuff, but we're so scared if we take off this country or this country or this country, we ain't going to have anything.
Right. Yeah. That's
if
right.
you read much, my wife's an avid science fiction reader, and she reads some of these really far out books. But anyway, there was one time she was reading this series about the 13, 14 families took over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, and what they could do and how. I thought it's frightening how real it sounds.
It absolutely is.
Well, I mean, look at how many of our higher people have stock in all these companies that are producing like half the. I mean,
What do you do with $1 billion?
you sit on it and don't use it.
You flaunt it. I mean, you flaunt it. I mean, there are billionaires that live on Lake Oconee.
I just can't imagine having that many zeros in my checkbook.
Well, I can't either, and I probably
I
never,
never will.
Nor should I. Nor
as,
should
my,
I.
as my dad says, I always want something I didn't have any business having.
But I think that the central banks in our world have yet again sort of eased us into a snake's sort of a boa constrictor's hold. But the question, but where is God in that? So we know. I think it's important for us to awaken to what's really happening. But the true awakening is realizing that no matter no matter all that, God is in control. I don't care who thinks they're in charge on this earth. They're all going to die, and
This too shall pass.
and Satan has been vanquished. His vanquishing was on the cross. Jesus Christ defeated death on the cross, and that's what I have. That's what I have, and I don't care. They can take my life today, whoever those powerful people are in the world. You know, but in the meantime, they haven't yet. In the meantime, like if we truly come to food riots in our world, and I think we're going to, will it happen in America? I don't know. But if it happens in Eatonton, look, they say if 9 days of hunger will lead to riots, food riots, and if people, and the other sort of calculation is if people have to spend half their money on food. That's like the sparking point for food riots. So I think in Eatonton, we should be hyper aware of the need that people are going to have. And you brought up PCO, and I brought up, the potential for soup kitchens in the Great Hall. We had better be the church. The people of God had better, if and when that moment happens, we absolutely have a calling to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world.
Well, here's one thing too, and it says, and it's about like when Jesus was eating with the Pharisees, I do believe it was, and they asked him, why are you eating with them? They're dirty sinners. We are at the hospital, and during all this, we're going to be the ones that heal and mend. Well, not us personally, but through God, He gives us the ability to help heal and mend the broken people of this world that are going to come to us. That's when they're at their weakest point and they're most vulnerable is when they need God the most. And it's our job as Christians and soldiers for God to help heal and mend.
Right.
Because we had the great physician guiding us.
Yes. So something that comes to my mind too is that oftentimes people think, well, the pastor or the bishop or the mayor or the county commissioner should solve this, or the president. But ultimately, it's really the people who need to solve it. It's the people of the church.
Well, if you notice, the church is always, even when governmental stuff goes straight down the tube, the church is always the center focal point of every town, every big city, even the countries of the world. The church is the big focus.
Yeah.
That's what draws people to us, is because we are known as healers. We are there. And even when the government's going down, the people come to the church.
Right.
That's why you have all these churches with big steeples. It's so people can find the church no matter what. They could see the steeple for miles and they could find the church.
I think about the last, 20 years since 9/11, 2001.
It's been 20 years.
And I think about, it's been over 20 years.
Yeah.
I think about how I personally sort of expected the leaders of our country to sort of solve this thing. But it didn't really solve anything because we're still on the brink of war. We went to Afghanistan, we went to Iraq twice, not once, but we went a second time.
To leave out Iran.
And we have sort of expected them to solve our problems, and all they've done is taken more power from in the sense of like the powers to the powers of homeland security, the powers of sort of vaccine passports emerging, the powers of I forget the law, but basically a law that I think Barack Obama put into place where if there was a crisis, they could take all the agricultural products and like tractors. They could take all the countries. The military could come and seize your agriculture and your farm supplies. These kind of crazy powers that have been emerged. So we've lost it. We've trusted our leaders, and we've found ourselves potentially powerless. But in the world that we live, we are still the people of God, and they can't take that away from
Right.
us. So now I think at 44 years of age, I'm almost 45. I think my first 20 years, I relied implicitly on the powers that be, and all they have done has taken more power away from me. But I think that at 45, I realized like the only way forward is with the people of God, and to bring the people of God together and let the small people of God, this is a Wizard of Oz moment, right? To let the little people be the powerful people, because that's really who God empowers, the little people.
Right.
All the little people, if they'll take it.
And you got to remember too, like we talked about in Sunday school, in John, when Christ went to Lazarus' grave and he wept. And the whole point is God's timing. He has a plan and he has a timeline. I can't understand that. Why is he allowing this to happen? Why didn't he just wipe off the face of the earth,
Well, it's
Zap.
actually been prophesied, but it's in a book that scares the heck out of people.
Revelations.
If we read our Bible like we're supposed to, which 90% of Christians, they
Don't.
own one,
Yeah.
but they open it once a year.
Well, they'll listen to the pastor talk about it too.
Right. But a lot of times Revelation is not really brought up in church because it scares people.
Scares me.
It talks about death and pestilence and theft.
The end of the
and,
world. And
One time I said,
just the four horsemen alone.
yeah.
I was a couple of months, I guess it was about 6 months ago, I stood before the church and I said, we're in the end times. And I mean,
I remember you saying that.
people's eyebrows rised up.
Yep.
And I said,
thought, what is he saying?
We've been in the end times since Jesus was resurrected.
Right.
That's the truth.
Well, people are like, they
And
look
we
at
have
me.
to remember God's timing.
Yeah.
There's this little movie I looked at on Netflix about in World War II they bombed a school. Anyway, the nun was talking about God's timing. She said sometimes God drops a pencil, and it takes him a while to pick that pencil up. So I can't imagine God's timeline. What is my life compared to God? I'm sure it's not even a
Not even a drop in the water.
nanosecond. It's not anything.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, is it going to take him my lifetime and my children's lifetime? I don't know.
I think I think it's in the Psalms. It says that our life is but a drop of water in the sea.
What is it? The wind, flowers. How's it? The wind blows across the grass and you wither. And I mean, I can't remember.
The
but
grass withers, the
That's
flowers
it.
fade. Yeah, we're our life is just.
And see, I look at all these world leaders. Oh, they're just so important. In about 15 years,
I wouldn't want that because I think you have to sell your soul for that.
there you go.
And what's more valuable in this world than our soul?
And see, I think that's what's wrong with the world today. There it is.
I mean, the spirit that God gave us.
I like this comment that we just got. I'm not scared. God is in charge, and I trust him completely. His timeline is perfect, and we are only asked to trust.
That's it. Trust and obey, for there's no other way.
That's right. That's
But
right.
how many times do we let our human nature kick in, and we try to control the situation?
And usually when I do that, it's when I get in trouble.
So as a Methodist, I can't help but believe that God is calling us to work forward in the garden, so to speak. I understand that we're supposed to trust and obey, and I don't think that's what the commenter is saying. I just think that I can't sit back and just wait for I don't know, for something to just drop.
The heavens to open up.
Like, Lord, would you please help provide for me today? Well, I've got to get up and go and do something. I gotta get out there in the garden and till.
He gave you whatever you need in your body to deal with whatever circumstance. I believe that as well as I'm sitting in this chair. God gave us all the mind to deal with whatever we have to deal with. And
my anxiety comes rising when I think about what we started with, which is we thinking about because of the prices of fertilizer, because of the prices of livestock being depressed, because of inflation, because of stagflation, where people are sort of standing around while the money goes, it magically appears in your bank account. I am aware that we're on the brink of food shortages. Like, we're 3 or 4 months, 5 months away. It'll probably hit like August, September, October. Like, the cans of food you buy in the store now were grown in August and September, right? So give yourself 6 to 9 months. So for me, the anxiety rises when I think, Lord, what are we going to do? But I'm with you, and I'm with the commenter. I trust the Lord.
That's
But I
right.
also realize that we're going to have to be. There's something. It's like my children can't predict what I can, and I'm their dad, so I am called to make sure they have shoes that
And
fit.
somewhere along the way, the world has lost the word stewardship.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
God gave us our life. Put us in this world. He expects us to listen to Him, to take care of it. And we have so busy sold our souls to the company store.
The
Exactly.
biggest
Yeah.
thing is, and my biggest complaint is, if you look at our denomination or denominations across the world,
It's not just ours.
because Baptists are fighting with certain battles, and the Methodists are fighting certain ones, Catholics are fighting some in their own demons. We take and we fight during a time like this when we know that there's going to be struggles. We should pull together and not fight over
That's right.
our doctrine at this point, because and I understand that that's an issue.
It's not the main
It should have
thing
been
right now.
resolved 5 years ago.
Right.
It's in the Bible. It should have been that, but that's a whole different debate. But at this time, we should all pull together and work as a unit, as one church, like God intended the church to be. He didn't mean for us to split into denominations. That was a man-made thing.
Yes.
He wanted us to all be followers of His Word and become one united church,
The way you
one
interpret
body.
the way you interpret that word leads to differences of opinion, which leads to different groups.
So
Right.
so maybe I'm not a Presbyterian, but maybe God is allowing this to happen in order that we are proven to be loving of one another and loving of God.
I just think, my faith in God is such that, look, He's got me in the palm of His hand. Every morning and every night, my prayers are for my children. God, keep them in the palm of your hand and keep them safe. I believe that. Now, does that mean it's going to be rosy and nothing? Nope.
Yeah, it says in the Bible we're going to go through struggles and turmoil.
We do every day. It's called getting up in the morning.
But
especially when you get hit by a
Oh,
cow.
yeah. I mean, it's like, whoa, jump back here. But, the whole point is God gives you what you need. The 3 P's. He preserves us. We're still here. He prepared us. He gave us what we need, and He's promised us. If
yeah,
you-
another comment too.
Amen.
You are supposed to live each day as needed, and let Him worry about the rest. It is all in His timing. We have free will, but we are to take one day at a time. We are blessed beyond measure. I am sure our parents and generations worried about similar things.
One day
Sure.
at a time, sweet Jesus.
I do think exactly. I think of my grandfather, who was a postman during World War II. He was a little old to fight, so he was in his 30s. So he was a postman already, but he moved up to New York and was in the Army with the postal, department of the Army. But I think about he and his wife. They did just fine. They made it through. But I just hate to think about. We have 8 billion-ish people in our world, and I've heard talks of starvation. It may not be death, but starvation is imminent because of the fertilizer issues, because of the lack of productivity, because you can't there's no profitability right now with fertilizer and oil prices. So there's transportation costs, and I know this is like details, and I know that God has this all figured out, but I just hate to believe that we would sit back idly and say, oh well, we're probably going to lose 4 billion people to starvation across this world.
Years ago, when I was teaching, I taught viruses and bacteria, and I always showed a movie. I'm not a tech guru, but I used technology in my classroom. Kids identify with it. There's a movie called Contagion.
It's actually a really good movie.
Oh, it is. It's been on Netflix. It's about a virus that is transmitted, believe it or not, from a bat to a pig to a one woman, and it shows how it spreads over. Well, it becomes a pandemic, almost worldwide. And there's a shot of the city, how it is closed down. They're going to the grocery store. There's absolutely nothing on the shelves. People are in the grocery store shooting each other over a can of beans or something.
Yeah.
And this lady had to go get like a insulin or something for her kid,
Yeah, it's just.
and she almost got a shot done.
So if God forbid that ever happened, but just thinking about these are like the fact that we're having these conversations in 2022, knowing that because our country and Russia and Ukraine and really I guess NATO, all of Western Europe are sort of are pitting themselves against each other. So we're no longer we've created the powers that be have created a global economy, and now they're shutting it down. And who are the ones that will suffer the most?
It's
It'll
it's
It'll be
us.
the poor.
Yeah.
Well, it won't even be us. It'll be those that are poor.
Below, I mean, that socioeconomic level below us.
Absolutely. And so it may hit. It's going to affect us too. But I am petrified to think that we just accept that as an existential reality. God is in this. God's somewhere in all of this, and we have to pray that God will move to stop.
I'm telling
this.
you, in October, whatever the date was, when the banks closed, my great aunt lives in the house I live in now. Went to town, drove her buggy. I think.
October of 29.
I think she the Farmers Emergency. It was Middle Georgia Bank. Was right where the Indian Messenger is now, on the corner there. She went up to the teller, stood in line. The line was all the way out to the street. Finally got in there. She had a little orange. I can see it plain said a little orange bank book, and she had $150 in the bank. Now, that's all the money she had in the world. She presented it to the lady. The lady drew a line through it and put a zero and said, "Miss Handler, I'm sorry, we don't have any money. You don't have anything." I asked her, I said, why didn't you just lose it? Her words, I'll never forget. She said, "God would take care of me if I did what he told me." So I came home, cried a little bit. Then I got busy and thought, now, what am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
How am I going? And see, that's what I see worldwide. Are people willing to do that? To pull in their gut, tighten their belt, and say, how are we going to get through this?
That's when people start robbing each other.
But honestly, there's the line. Are we going to choose to follow God and trust God,
Or Satan.
or are we going to move to our sort of darker sort of reality of, well, I'll just steal from someone or I'll just rob someone? So this is where the church can be a part of God's salvation, if only to work together, to care for one another, to walk with our palms up, trusting God, and not.
You look at the history of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, the church was the one unifying structure in almost any town, any village, whatever. They opened the doors, they stayed open. Now, sure, they were full of sin itself, but
Of course.
they were ministering to the people.
So I think
Well, I remember times church was open 24 hours a day. You go kneel and pray whenever you needed to.
Yeah,
But now you have to worry about people burning churches, robbing churches.
stealing everything.
I mean, a lot of times the churches where I grew up at had nothing on the altar table except for a wooden cross and a wooden box because they didn't want to get robbed.
I mean, if we do see our country move into a depression, I think we'll see the hunger amongst the people, I think the hunger will rise. But I just pray for that, because I'd rather have that than anything else in the world. As a follower of Jesus, I personally would rather see the people hungry to serve God and to pray to God and to love one another, and let me sort of just be somebody that's in the background. I mean, I mean, obviously as a pastor, I hope to lead the congregation, but I do think that when the power of Christ moves and compels the people, therein.
So what can we do in the world? We can look at our own immediate world and try to be a good steward and be a good mentor to people around
It's
us.
the Shema. It's the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Agape.
So we've gone a little bit over, and I have a 10:30 appointment. So we always have a 10:30 appointment. I have a Bible study. So thank you for being a part of this, and I ask that we all pray for our world, be aware of the world, and that, but pray for it and ask God to move supernaturally, and show you and me and all of us.
Next week we do what?
what we're to
What's
do.
wrong with
Nation.
the nation?
All right, that's gonna be a little bit more.
So you have a
touchy.
whole week to think about
That's
that.
gonna be a little bit touchy. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Yeah, well, we went over a little.